You're watching The World with me, Charles Aniagolu. Now, the Russian President Vladimir Putin is continuing his two-day visit to India. He's holding talks today with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The Trump administration is said to be watching the meeting closely as the US president has accused India of financing Russia's war on Ukraine by buying its oil and is putting pressure on Delhi to stop doing this. And in August, Washington imposed 50% sanctions on Indian exports. Correspondents say it's a tightrope walk for Mr. Modi as he tries to balance ties with an age-old ally like Russia and the West, not to mention the possibility of a US-India trade deal, which has remained elusive so far.
As for India's purchases or purchase of energy resources from Russia, well, I would like to note and have already mentioned this publicly once. The US itself still buys nuclear fuel from us for its own nuclear power plants. That is also fuel, uranium for the reactors operating in the United States. If the US has the right to buy our fuel, why shouldn't India have the same privilege? This question deserves thorough examination, and we stand ready to discuss it, including with President Trump.
Your Excellency, my friend Rashtrapati Putin.
Your Excellency, my friend Vladimir Putin, distinguished business leaders from Russia and India, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the India-Russia Business Forum. I am very pleased. I believe that President Putin has proposed a very important initiative by bringing such a large delegation to today's event. I wholeheartedly welcome you all, and it is a great honor for me to be among you. On behalf of India, I would like to express my special gratitude to my friend, President Putin, for participating in this forum and sharing valuable ideas. Simplified, predictable mechanisms are being created. Negotiations have begun on the conclusion of a free trade agreement between India and the Eurasian Economic Union. As has already been said today, as friends we are working in various areas, which Mr. Putin has just mentioned. We can achieve very significant goals in a very short time, whether it's business or diplomacy. The foundation of any partnership is mutual trust. In India-Russia relations, this is the greatest strength.
Narendra Modi and before him, Vladimir Putin. Now, the German parliament has voted to introduce voluntary military service aimed at boosting national defenses after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The legislation, which came through after months of heated debate, introduces a dual-track system, a more lucrative voluntary service intended to attract young recruits. But if enlistment falls short, lawmakers can activate needs-based conscription, though this would require a separate vote in Parliament. But the idea has divided young people in schools across Germany today. Students have been on strike in protest against what they fear may turn out to become conscription. Well, for more on this, both those stories, in fact, I'm joined now on the line from London by the author and international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Good to see you, Dr. Laskiewicz. Let's start with the first one, the Russian president in India. We've been looking at pictures of the red carpet treatment that Vladimir Putin has been getting in India, the world's most populous country. How is that being seen more broadly across Europe, especially when they view it against the backdrop of his very friendly terms with China, the world's second biggest economy? Because, I mean, the EU wants him to be more isolated, doesn't it? But he clearly isn't as isolated as they would like.
Well, he's never been isolated. This is part of the Western propaganda that he's a beleaguered man in Moscow. Far from it. All that's happening now is, what with the US pressure from President Donald Trump, more people are coming into the open. But he has at least three key Asian allies, China, India, and Iran. And the fact of the matter is that these three have very big economies, and he really doesn't need Europe from that point of view. Europe announced actually just today that there will be no more need for Russian gas and oil. Well, So what? He's sending it to India, China, Iran, and anywhere else going, including, incidentally, sells some stuff still to the USA. So the fact of the matter is this is an extremely successful visit for President Putin. Extremely bad news from that point of view for the EU. And Donald Trump has been monitoring this because, in a sense, his prestige is at stake, because if India goes too far in the direction of Russia, it will show that it does not care what he has to say, and that will be bad. So, on the whole, just roses and roses for President Putin. Incidentally, he's brought businessmen with him as well to actually further the amount of trade they're doing, which, incidentally, need not use American dollars. That's another important.
Right, we just missed the last bit of what you said there, but I think we got most of what you said. But it's interesting, Dr. Laskiewicz, that what we didn't see today in concrete agreements on the most talked about issues like oil, I mean, we didn't see any agreements on that. We did hear Vladimir Putin say he's prepared to keep selling oil to India, but we don't know what Mr. Modi is going to do we, about oil and indeed about the purchase of Russian weapons, because he's coming under enormous pressure from America. And I wonder whether you think Mr. Modi's silence reflects the balancing act that India has to do.
Yes. The last thing I stated, by the way, was that India and Russia and China are no longer using dollars if they can avoid it, which is very important. But here, as you rightly say, it's a balancing act. But there's a second aspect. You see, what happens on the surface is for media, for public consumption. But what's happening underneath is there could be, if you like, talks about oil being sold to India or arms. And here, they needn't announce it. And I suspect that there will be secret clauses in all these meetings whereby trade will continue without flaunting it in the face of America.
Going beyond just this visit to India to the kind of the bigger picture, which you've analyzed for us over the last few days, weeks and months, in fact, what do you make so far of where they're going with this American effort to try to end the war in Ukraine? Does it look to you like it's bearing fruit?
What is important is all sides are talking. However, there is no easy treaty in sight. Some clauses have been agreed. That's true on the whole. However, the key ones haven't. And incidentally, President Putin is massing troops for another onslaught on Donbass. So the point is that he wins if Ukraine signs the treaty, which will be largely on his terms, or if Ukraine loses militarily, which is possible because, as I say, Ukraine is massing its assault. And so from this point of view, it's a good time for President Putin. And President Zelensky has got the further problem. He's not sure how far President Trump is going to support it, because President Trump said previously, if he didn't agree to some sort of treaty, he would simply stop supplying Ukraine, even with this real-time information, the Starlink.
And do you think that in the context of what you've just said, the Ukrainians should be engaging with this American process, even though they really can't entirely trust that process, or they don't really have much of a choice?
Well, they don't actually have all that much of a choice, because it absolutely hinges crucially on American arms. I mean, when they switched off just for 1 week in Kursk, the information, the real-time information that the Ukrainian forces got, they collapsed in that area. And so the real problem is Ukraine could be absolutely up against it with an ultimatum from America to take it, or consider them, the America would walk away, and Ukraine be very hard-pressed not to take it. But if it does take it, look at the situation. There's that clause about reducing Ukraine military strength down to 60,000 troops. Well, you can see what's going to happen. After a year, 2 years, take your pick, there's going to be a provocation of some sort, a terrorist attack in Moscow, goodness knows what. Anyway, casus belli, And the Russian army, which has no such limitations on it, will simply overwhelm a 60,000 strong army. I mean, to be quite honest, 60,000 troops couldn't even hold Pokrovsk in the area. So basically, Putin, if these terms go through, has Ukraine absolutely where it wants it for a subsequent mopping up operation.
Sounds really quite extraordinary, let me put it that way. But let's turn to Germany, where students have taken to the streets as German MPs voted to bring back a form of voluntary military service that could eventually become compulsory if too few people sign up amid the Russian threat. Well, certainly no joy and enthusiasm among sort of many young Germans. Quite a few are skeptical, even hostile to the idea. Why are they so opposed to this change?
Well, the point about it is, it's quite clear that Europe and Russia are squaring up for some sort of war. I mean, Europe has considered quite openly taking $200 billion worth of assets from Russia, which would be a casus belli. It is sending extra aid to Poland, military aid in terms of tanks and whatnot. And tanks are an instrument of aggression. So from the Russia's point of view, Europe is sending very clear signals that it wants to attack. From Europe's point of view, it is simply trying to defend itself. And that's why hence comes this conscription. The conscription will certainly annoy the Russians and certainly worry them, in the sense perhaps they ought to be waging war on this before everything gets going. But that's not the real problem. The problem is the Germans don't want it. There have been surveys carried out in Germany and in Poland, incidentally, which show that very many youngsters who are going to be conscripted into the army do not want to fight for their country. And that is a really difficult situation. It therefore follows, if the voluntary conscription fails, as is likely, judging by all sides, and they have to go for a compulsory one, it just will show weakness on the side of Germany that is posturing against Russia, but cannot back it up with force. That's the implication. And it gets worse, of course, because even if you have compulsory conscription, it's by no means clear that such an army in the field will fight or even stay together. It might literally melt away. These things have happened, by the way, in military history.
Right, very, very interesting. Dr. Laskiewicz, I want to thank you very much indeed. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the author and international affairs analyst who was talking to me on the line there from London.